We did Hyderabad a while back, and obviously Punjab and Rajasthan have been covered. So now the exit interview of all exit interviews, Mumbai.
This is the last knock. My dad refuses to tell me what this means.
There are some people in these here comments who think that Mumbai is my team. Perish the thoughts. Or worse, they think that there's some sort of narrative thing and we all want Mumbai to do really well. Let me tell you about how narrative works. The absolute best thing that could happen would be a team getting really, really good and then collapsing spectacularly. Think Golden State Warriors in the NBA. Mumbai haven't even done that. From a narrative point of view, this is more annoying. If they just won every year, that'd be great. But they win, and sometimes they're just weirdly average. And this is a weirdly average year. But the other annoying thing about Mumbai is just all the baggage they bring from us, rather than even from themselves. And when they made runs in that last game, and it looked like they might actually somehow sneak into the finals for about 12 seconds. Social media is suddenly about how the league is fixed for them again, and the fix is in, and all this sort of stuff. We have more Mumbai baggage than Mumbai has about Mumbai. And Mumbai has a lot of that. I mean, they made a whole documentary where their, son's owner walked into a wall and, there was cake. I don't know. I don't really remember the documentary. And they're an impossible team to think about because look at this year. You cannot look at them on paper and judge them the same way that you would judge other teams who weren't winning very much. You just can't because they were clearly still a very, very good team. You can say, well, they're not playing on the field, but realistically, those sorts of things happen all the time. This looked like a good team on paper, and it played like a team made of paper. Essentially, on the field, they played this like it was the last days of school, and the teacher was still in the room, and they were technically still there, but that was about it. I mean, let's be really clear about this. Let's look at the table to make this really, really clear. When you look at the 4 teams above them, they played them 8 times. They won 2 of those games. That means they won 5 of their 6 against the teams below them. That gives you a really good idea of how they were going. When they did play an ordinary team, as we saw at the end of the season, they were brilliant. When they played anyone good, they didn't really go anywhere. And that's partially why they look so good at the end of the season. 3 of their last 4 games were teams who weren't very good. And they played very well against them. And then when they played Delhi, which was their chance realistically to make it to the finals, they didn't win. Every time they had a chance to beat a team above them, most of the times, in quite a few games, they had chances to beat a team above them, and they didn't. It's all well and good to roll Rajasthan for 20 runs and smash 400 runs against Hyderabad. What do you do against the teams that you're actually going to have to play in the finals kind of matters a lot. And all they had to do was be a 50-50 team against those teams, and they would have been right at the top, most probably. But how on earth does a team with this kind of firepower on it just end up with a 50-50 record? They're a 500 team, and they look better than that. And there are people who, just on hearing that line, will be very upset. They will point at the points table and go, this is how good they are. I think realistically in these shorter seasons, we have to just accept the fact that sometimes a team like Mumbai is just going to have a bit of a bad run, and it's going to cost them. It's only 14 games, and Mumbai probably had 2 periods where they just weren't winning at all. And they had won the previous 2 titles as well. And even with only 8 teams involved, chances of them winning 3 in a row was always going to be tricky. So of the teams to miss the finals, they're the ones that are the most perplexing, but also, in some ways, the most obvious. Because when it comes to their batting, it's quite clear why they weren't a consistently winning team, especially against the better sides. Their batting, man by man, was just ordinary. Rohit was about the same as he's been for years, but he hasn't been an incredibly above average batter in the league for the last 3 or 4 years. He's just been okay. And again, he was fine. If you put his exact same performances in a better team, he would be okay. But unfortunately, he was like one of the standout batters. QDK just was, didn't score very quick. And the problem was he actually batted for long periods. His average is fine, but he just went at such an incredibly slow pace all the way through the tournament. He'd had 2 up years, and Mumbai had won the title in those years as well. And then he went back to the sort of form that sometimes he can do. He's probably never going to be a consistently high run scorer with a high strike rate year in, year out. He's going to have lower years, and this was one of them. At 3 and 4 is Ishan Kishan and Sky, and they both had terrible years. Ishan was dropped twice this season alone. What an incredible talent to be able to drop. Sky never looked himself at all from beginning to end, and Ishan eventually came good when it kind of didn't matter anymore against a very weak team. They're both incredibly talented players. If both of them had bad years in the same year, you would think that's unlucky. But the fact that it also went with QDK's year, that just meant that the top four just wasn't doing what it was supposed to be doing. And behind them in the order is the strength. The Pandya brothers and Kieran Pollard. That's generally what other teams haven't been able to match, that incredible middle core. Well, Krunal Pandya wasn't good, and when you look at the numbers, he's been on the slide for a little while now. I don't know if that means teams have worked him out or what the situation is, but this was his worst season with the bat. It was also probably Hardik's worst season with the bat. Now, that's obviously a lot more understandable with the injuries and the coming in and the out, all those sorts of things, but it's still a really bad year for Hardik. For a player of his level to have a year this bad is, well, it's worrying. Not worrying for him because he's an attacking player and sometimes you're going to have lower years, but it's worrying to think if something else has changed within his game. Glenn Maxwell has up and down periods, we're used to that. Hardik probably should have had them, but hasn't had them before. Does that mean that's a new pattern with him? Or is it just a weird year? Both of those are possible at this stage. And even without his bowling, obviously they kept trying him with a bat, because if he does come good, who are you replacing him with? And that's kind of the problem for Mumbai as well. And following all those guys is Kieran Pollard, who actually did pretty much more or less what he always does. He had a very Kieran Pollard-like season. I think his stats this year are almost exactly the same as his career record in the league. So that means they had Rohit at the top, doing Rohit things, Pollard at the bottom doing Pollard things, and 5 guys in the middle just nowhere near their best, and in some cases, their absolute worst. So Mumbai had a middle order void. But, as we've said, they still went 7-7. They had a 500 season. There are years when going 7-7 is enough to get you into the finals. Well, I mean, it was this year for Kolkata. And there'll be games that they will think back on as a franchise, like the Chennai one. I mean, the Chennai one is one of the more hilarious losses you could see. They had Chennai 4 wickets down and a retired Hurt within the power play. How on earth do you lose that game? And if they held that match, again, they're in the finals. And how did they get all those early wickets? Through their bowlers. And it's worth talking about their bowlers because I thought their bowlers did a very good job. They maybe weren't as spectacular as other seasons, but they certainly were not the problem here. Trent Boult and Krunal Pandya both struggled for wickets. Boult had an incredible year last year, but he hasn't been a consistent wicket taker in this league. Krunal is more of a low economy type of bowler, but in years gone past, he did actually used to take wickets as well. They've just dried up over the last couple of seasons. They probably could have allowed Boult to have a slightly depressed wicket tally if Krunal had had a good year, but the fact that both of them didn't, and they were both automatic picks, made it a little bit tricky. But it's not the end of the world for Mumbai, because with those two still keeping it tight, and they both had pretty decent economy years, Jasper Bumrah at the other end does overcome a lot of that, and he had another Jasper-like year. He was fine. There was certainly no problems from him. In some cases, just because he was out there, he changes the way that teams think about how they're making a chase against Mumbai, and he seems to give them more of a chance to win. Even if it's not particularly his balls that are doing the damage. Although, quite often it is just his balls doing the damage. Googlies, quarter seamer, Karen, Dukes, back of the hand, red, leg cutters, Tisra, pink, knuckle, white, slider, seed, heavy, bounces, cherry, length, pill, off cutters, old, crimson traveller, kookaburra, hard, outswing, second new, off spin, arm, SG, split finger, shiny, leg spin, soft, new, Yorkers, flippers, wrong ends, long hops, reverse swing, half volley, and third new. These are just some of the names we use for balls in cricket. Well, Manscaped wants you to be as proud of your balls as you are of the ones delivered by your favourite cricketer. Manscaped just launched their 4th generation trimmer, the Lawnmower 4.0. Join over 2 million men worldwide who trust Manscaped with this exclusive offer, 20% off and free worldwide shipping. Insert the code REDINKA at manscaped.com. I've actually used this, not just something that I'm hawking for fun, and I got to admit, I thought it was a bit silly, and then I went down there, and it was exceptional. I honestly feel I could bowl outswing with one nut and inswing with the other. So get 20% off and free worldwide shipping with the code REDINKA at manscaped.com. Manscaped, for the man who cares about his balls as much as the ones out in the middle. And of the other 4 regular bowlers, it was Rahul Chahar. This is his 3rd straight year of being a huge plus for Mumbai. I don't think you can look at his numbers and think anything other than that was a really good season, and you'd be happy to get that out of your local leg spin at any time. The 5th bowler was handled by kind of everyone on the roster at one point or another. Obviously, if Hardik had been able to bowl, that would have been a little bit different, would have given them a bit more flexibility. And if you drop normal fit Hardik into this team, it's a better team without any doubt. They'd probably make the finals, even if he batted the way that he did. But without him, they did look at times maybe a little bit one-dimensional. The idea of not changing a lineup a lot, which makes sense other than for certain matchups, it's a good idea. It's just that in this particular case, no one came good. That's not having a go at the management. That sometimes these things happen. More often than not, they pick the most talented players available to them. It's just that the most talented players didn't get it done. Compared to the other 3 teams that didn't make the finals though, this still has a core that you would most like to, take forward with you. Now, obviously the mega auction's coming and you can't take all of the core, and Mumbai's going to have some tricky decisions to make. But I think one way or another, they've still got more to go forward with because they have more. Even if it was a bad year, a bad year with good players is still better than a bad year with bad players. They may not be able to keep all their local Indian players. They may not even want to keep all of their local Indian players. But Rohit, Sky, Ishan, the Pandyas, Jasprit Bumrah, Rahul Chahar, there's a lot there. There are some other teams who don't have more than 1 or 2 names anywhere near that level. So it means that Mumbai should be in a good place going forward. They'll probably have to restock their overseas players. They'll overpay for Karan Pollard because everyone knows that they'll match anything that you probably try and pay him. They may look around for another opening batter to go with Rohit, maybe someone slightly different than QDK, and they might look at a different new ball bowler than Trent Bolt. We don't really know how the mega auction's going to play out yet, but we know that you'd rather be in a place where you have a bunch of local players you can take rather than, I've done the exit interviews for the other team. It's slim for them. In some cases, they're just going to have to pick the best players and start again with the rest of the squad. As for this year, it's probably just a bit of a write-off year for Mumbai. When 5 of your 7 best batters don't really make any runs and your seam bowling all-rounder can't bowl seam, one of those things. And yeah, they're better than the other 3 teams, but the other 3 teams, similar things happen to them. There's a certain point in a short season where it's hard to overcome any kind of sense of calamity. And there was a lot of calamity within this. And losing your whole batting lineup, that's a lot of calamity. They can also take some positives out of it. This was a shithouse season for them, and still some of the other teams were absolutely terrified just of their existence. And they almost stole a place in the finals anyway. But unlike Calcutta, they never really worked out how to fix the day-to-day problems and get the team better. And sometimes that just gets away from you. And the good news for opposition fans is, instead of saying they've won 5 of the last 8 titles, we can say 5 of the last 9. If you're a Mumbai fan, I really don't think this is the end of the world. If you're not a Mumbai fan, enjoy every single loss that this monster had.